A lot of credit. Shedeur Sanders, was he great? Played good enough.
Yeah.
And they just played good enough where you let them hang around. And you hate that as a coach. You're sitting there going, guys, let's go, let's go. All of a sudden it's the fourth quarter and this game is tight.
The moment Randy Moss shut down the anti-Shedeur Sanders narrative on live TV wasn't loud at first, but it hit like a sledgehammer. It came during one of those routine football debates where analysts love to nitpick young quarterbacks before they've even been given real space to grow. The same recycled talking points were flying around again. Overhyped, protected, system QB, media creation, all the usual noise that's followed Shedeur Sanders since the moment his name started ringing nationally. But this time, it didn't slide. Randy Moss, one of the most respected football minds to ever touch the field, wasn't having it, and he made that crystal clear in real time. Moss leaned forward, cut through the chatter, and flat out rejected the framing being pushed. He didn't raise his voice or play politics. He just laid down facts. He pointed out the work ethic, the pocket presence, the processing speed, and the calm under pressure that separates real quarterbacks from hype jobs. Moss made it clear that the criticism wasn't about football anymore. It was about comfort levels.
And what gives you that confidence you guys are going to be able to right the ship next week?
Because we've done it all season. We've handled adversity well, and we had to play our best ball. Yeah, we did, other than today.
If you really love the sport and you really love the game.
What made the moment powerful wasn't just what Moss said, but who he is. Randy Moss isn't some hot take artist chasing clicks. This is a Hall of Famer who saw every type of defender, every type of locker room, and every type of quarterback ego imaginable. When someone like that speaks, players listen, coaches listen, and even front offices pause. The tension in the studio shifted instantly. The energy changed. Analysts who had been casually throwing shade suddenly got quiet. Because once Moss reframed the conversation around production and poise instead of narrative, the cracks showed. Moss specifically referenced how Shedeur has consistently delivered in pressure situations despite chaos around him. Coaching changes, defensive breakdowns, national scrutiny. None of it shook his mechanics or decision-making. That's not luck, that's preparation. This wasn't Moss defending a player because of family ties or hype cycles. This was Moss calling out selective evaluation in real time. He made it clear that quarterbacks like Shedeur are often judged by a different standard, one where mistakes are magnified and success is minimized. And once those words landed, the conversation could never go back to surface-level criticism again. This wasn't just a defense of Shedeur Sanders. It was a challenge to the entire media ecosystem that's been shaping the narrative around him since day one. The reason this moment mattered so much is because the anti-Shedeur narrative didn't come out of nowhere.
They kind of fell under the same line of thinking that the Packers did. We'll just throw everything at them and see if we can muster effort to win without it.
Still as confident as ever that you get the record next week?
Absolutely. Why shouldn't I be?
What game fewer?
4 more quarters, 60 more minutes, however you want to draw it up, but it'll get done.
It's been building quietly, layer by layer, ever since his rise started disrupting the usual power structure. The skepticism followed him from high school to college and now into the professional conversation, not because of performance, but because of visibility. Shedeur Sanders doesn't just play quarterback, he carries a spotlight that makes people uncomfortable. The confidence, the branding, the leadership style, the refusal to shrink. Those traits are praised in some quarterbacks and criticized in others depending on who's wearing the helmet. Randy Moss knew exactly what he was watching unfold. He lived through similar treatment during his own career. Moss was labeled a problem before being recognized as a generational talent. So when he heard the same coded language being used again, he stepped in without hesitation. Moss broke down how Shedeur's pocket movement and decision speed are already ahead of most quarterbacks at the same stage. He highlighted how Shedeur manipulates defenders with his eyes, keeps his base under pressure, and doesn't panic when protection breaks down. Those aren't flashy traits, but they win games. The media often prefers loud narratives over quiet excellence. That's why Moss shutting it down live mattered. He forced the conversation back to film, fundamentals, and football intelligence. What followed was telling. Clips of the segment went viral almost immediately. Players reposted it. Coaches nodded along. Fans who had felt the bias but couldn't articulate it finally had a clear reference point. Multiple former players privately praised Moss for saying what many were thinking but wouldn't say on camera. There's a real fear of backlash when challenging media groupthink. Moss didn't care. This wasn't about defending a name, it was about defending the integrity of evaluation. And once that line was drawn, it exposed how fragile the narrative really was. The anti-Shedeur storyline survives on repetition, not evidence. Moss dismantled it by simply pointing to what happens between the lines.
Aaron, when you let go of an opportunity like that, you clinch. How difficult is it to bounce back? You know you got one more shot.
I mean, it's not difficult. That's our job, playing all 17.
And once that door opened, it became impossible to ignore how many times Shedeur has answered every challenge thrown his way. Another reason this moment shook the industry is because it came at a time when Shedeur's on-field results were already backing him up. Internal metrics from multiple scouting departments show his efficiency under pressure ranking near the top of his class. That doesn't match the public skepticism at all. Moss referenced this gap indirectly by questioning why certain quarterbacks are given time to develop while others are expected to be flawless immediately. That double standard isn't accidental, it's cultural. Shedeur Sanders doesn't fit the traditional mold of quiet obedience. He speaks with confidence and he commands attention. He leads openly. For some corners of the media, that's threatening. Moss didn't sugarcoat it. He said winning doesn't care about feelings, branding, or narratives. Winning responds to preparation, execution, and composure. And Shedeur checks those boxes. The segment triggered behind-the-scenes discussions at multiple networks about how quarterback coverage is framed. That doesn't happen often. It only happens when a truth lands too hard to ignore. The irony is that the same traits criticized in Shedeur are celebrated in quarterbacks who fit a different image. Moss made that contradiction impossible to defend. This wasn't just a moment, it was a mirror, and not everyone liked what it reflected. The league is evolving. Quarterbacks are becoming brands, leaders, and system architects. Shedeur represents that shift. Resistance to it doesn't stop progress, it only exposes discomfort. Moss understood that immediately. That's why he spoke up when he did. The silence that followed wasn't agreement. It was recognition. Recognition that the conversation had shifted beyond surface-level takes. And once the narrative cracked, it couldn't be patched back together with the same old talking points. The ripple effects from that broadcast are still spreading. Shedeur's camp took notice, not publicly but strategically. When respected voices validate performance, leverage grows. That matters at every level. Draft rooms, endorsement talks, and long-term planning. Randy Moss didn't just defend a quarterback, he reinforced a standard. A standard that says evaluation should match evidence. That's dangerous for lazy narratives. Analysts who thrive on controversy suddenly had to work harder, because once someone like Moss steps in, the audience starts demanding substance. Younger players are paying attention too. They're seeing that respect comes from consistency, not silence.
Tried to do everything he could to get away from Myles Garrett, but your defense kept him out of the end zone. What can you say about their standout performance today at home?
The defense is great. I know a couple of weeks they had something to prove, but I feel like they stamped it. They got back to who they were.
This moment also exposed how media cycles create villains and heroes before careers even start. Moss refused to let that happen unchecked. There's power in timing, and Moss chose his moment perfectly. The segment will be replayed for years, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. And honesty travels further than noise. This wasn't just a defense, it was a reset. A reset of how Shedeur Sanders is discussed, evaluated, and respected. Randy Moss didn't just shut down a narrative, he dismantled it piece by piece. This moment will be referenced every time lazy criticism resurfaces, because once truth is spoken clearly, it's hard to pretend it wasn't heard. Shedeur Sanders keeps proving it on the field. Moss proved it in the booth. What made Randy Moss stepping in so powerful is the weight his name carries in football spaces. This isn't a talking head repeating social media takes. This is one of the greatest wide receivers ever, a player who forced defensive coordinators to rewrite game plans just to survive Sundays. When someone with that resume speaks, it changes the temperature instantly. Randy Moss has seen elite quarterback play up close for decades. From Hall of Fame passers to talented prospects who never figured it out, Moss knows the difference between hype and substance. That's why his defense of Shedeur Sanders landed so heavy.
A lot of credit. Shedeur Sanders, Was he great? Played good enough.
Yeah.
And they just played good enough where you let them hang around, and you hate that as a coach. You're sitting there going, guys, let's go, let's go. All of a sudden it's the fourth quarter and this game is tight. Cleveland is gaining confidence as this thing goes on.
Shedeur Sanders is certainly a candidate at minimum for the play to win the game. But to your point earlier, this is now the fourth straight road loss for the Steelers in Cleveland. That's their longest such streak.
Moss wasn't reacting emotionally. He was diagnosing football. Moss zeroed in on how Shedeur handles pressure without panic. He highlighted how the ball comes out on time, how reads are processed quickly, and how leadership shows up even when the game script breaks down. Those are traits coaches pray for, not manufacture. What really shook people was how calm Moss was while shutting everything down. No theatrics, no yelling, just facts. That calm confidence made the criticism look flimsy and forced viewers to reconsider what they'd been told to believe. Inside league circles, moments like that matter. When a legend speaks, scouts take note, executives take note, media members quietly adjust language. It doesn't always show publicly, but it shifts how conversations happen behind closed doors. This wasn't Moss protecting a player, it was Moss protecting the game. Because when narratives replace evaluation, talent gets misread, careers get delayed, and the sport loses credibility. And Moss wasn't about to let that happen again in real time. Even after moments like that, the anti-Shedeur narrative doesn't disappear overnight. It lingers because it serves a purpose for certain voices. Controversy sells better than context, and skepticism creates engagement even when it's unsupported. Shedeur Sanders represents a shift that some parts of the football world are still adjusting to. A quarterback who owns his image, a leader who speaks confidently, a player who doesn't wait for approval to move like a franchise guy. That energy disrupts old expectations. Historically, quarterbacks were praised for blending in, not standing out. But the game has changed. NIL deals, social media, branding, direct access to fans. Shedeur grew up in that reality and mastered it early. The pushback isn't about arm talent or decision-making, it's about comfort. Moss saw that instantly. That's why he framed the conversation around execution instead of personality. Every time Shedeur performs well, the goalposts move. When stats are strong, critics point to surroundings. When leadership shows, they call it arrogance. When wins stack up, they downplay competition. That pattern isn't accidental, it's selective evaluation. Moss cutting through that pattern on live TV forced people to confront it. And once confronted, it becomes harder to justify. That's why the moment keeps circulating, because it didn't just defend a quarterback, it exposed how narratives are built and protected. The truth made people uncomfortable, and discomfort is where real change starts. Moments like this don't just shape public opinion, they influence trajectories. Quarterback perception affects everything from draft conversations to endorsement leverage to patience during development. When a respected voice like Randy Moss validates Shedeur Sanders publicly, it adds insulation. It gives teams confidence to trust what they see on film rather than what's trending online. That matters in a league where careers can swing on perception alone. Shedeur doesn't need saving. The play speaks for itself. But moments like this remove unnecessary noise. They allow evaluation to return to fundamentals. Younger quarterbacks watching this also learn something important. Silence isn't the only path to respect. Sometimes respect comes when someone credible is willing to say the obvious out loud. Moss didn't just shut down criticism, he set a precedent. A reminder that football voices still matter more than viral narratives. And that precedent will follow Shedeur forward. Every time doubt resurfaces, this moment will be referenced. Every time lazy takes appear, Moss's words will echo. That's the real impact. Not headlines, not clips, influence. Shedeur Sanders keeps building on the field. Randy Moss made sure the conversation around him finally matched the reality. And if this breakdown added clarity to why that live TV moment mattered more than it looked, like the video and subscribe so the next shift in the football conversation doesn't pass unnoticed.